Want to know how Canada's top entrepreneurs think about creating significant wealth? Join me, Thane Stenner, founder of Stenner Wealth Partners at CG Wealth Management and host of the Smart Wealth podcast. Download today at iHeartRadio or your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe now. Hello, everybody. My name is Thane Stenner of Stenner Wealth Partners of CG Wealth Management, and I'm your host for the monthly BNN Bloomberg Smart Wealth podcast, where I get to interview some of the smartest minds and thought leaders in business. I have a very special guest today, Andrew Chau. And I can tell you that I think you'll be very impressed with this entrepreneur who's a real Canadian success story. So I'll give you a few little bits about his bio first. Andrew is co-founder and chief executive officer of Neo Financial, which is a leading Canadian fintech company that's transforming how Canadians earn, save, and spend their money. And he'll tell us more about that in a bit. This company was founded in 2019, has raised, says here on the bio, more than 299 million. Let's just round up and say 300 million in funding, and employs more than 700 people in Calgary and Winnipeg, and has been recognized by Canada's top tech startup by LinkedIn. So some very strong recognitions in the marketplace and a very exciting growth story that we'll learn more about today. In addition to serving more than 1 million customers so far, basically Neo powers financial solutions for leading brands, including Tim Hortons, Hudson's Bay, and Cathay Pacific, just to name a few. Prior to Neo, Andrew and his co-founding partners founded a company that some of you likely have utilized, which is an app for online delivery of food, and that was SkiptheDishes. So this is not Andrew's first rodeo with Neo Financial. He and his partners have actually had a very successful exit on that first company back in 2016, where they sold that company for over $200 million. Originally, Andrew was from Saskatchewan and the heartland of Canada. And Andrew now lives in Calgary, so he's coming to us from Calgary. He knows my background, little Calgary background, and make him feel welcome. So, again, it's very exciting for me to be able to speak with him today and to share some of his learnings and successes along the way. Just to set the table here, Andrew and his partners have been truly a Canadian entrepreneurial success story. And there's too few of them here in Canada today. So we want to celebrate that and we want to learn from that. So welcome, Andrew.
Right on. Thanks for having me here, Thane, and really an honor to be on your show.
You're welcome. It's an honor to have you. So let's get started. So the life of an entrepreneur. This is your second main opportunity that you and your partners have been building up. Tell me, let's just go back in time, rewind in time a little bit to say, life growing up as Andrew Chau. So just take us back to early stage and kind of, life in Saskatchewan and then kind of moving to Calgary.
Absolutely. So, obviously, you already introduced a bit of my background, but I grew up in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which generally isn't known as a hotbed for technology companies. And growing up in Saskatchewan, my parents had immigrated to Canada back in the late 1970s, coming from Vietnam. Came here really with nothing from that standpoint, and had to build a new life in a brand new country and with a language that they didn't really know or understand. So I had sort of seen that obviously through my childhood, and by the time I sort of came around, I saw how hard they worked, and I basically grew up in the restaurant that they ended up sort of buying and building. So I was in the back kitchen, literally peeling potatoes and carrots, day in, day out, working there during all my summers, all my weekends, pretty much all the way up until I was, I left Saskatoon, and learned a lot from just being in it, and being in a business environment. My parents, kept it very small. They owned the place for 30 years, never once brought on a single external dollar. They didn't really know what investors meant. They just knew, hey, we could bring in 200 customers one day, we make this amount, and the next day bring in another 200, and that was sort of their day in and day out.
Hmm.
So I learned a lot about that experience, and I'd say that was really my first exposure to entrepreneurship at its true, mom and pop style. And from there, that's sort of what sparked me to want to build something on my own one day. And, whether it was always trying to figure out what the next idea was when I was a young kid and trying to, sell things on the internet, all the way through to obviously, after graduating, didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went into consulting for a period for about 4 or 5 years. Did that at the Boston Consulting Group, and then eventually paired up with a few of my former classmates to start SkiptheDishes.
Hmm. So, most listeners will be familiar with that brand. So where did that idea come from? I mean, obviously you'd worked in a restaurant, so I'm sure there's some inspiration there, but just like, how did you and your co-founders kind of come up with that concept?
Well, it's funny because as I was growing up, and you're in high school, you're figuring out what to do, what career to choose. I remember my parents sort of telling me, whatever you end up doing, just don't own your own restaurant. And of course, I ended up doing food delivery, which is like pretty close parallel.
Yeah, yeah.
But in terms of the idea came from, again, one of my other co-founders who had started it. He's the one who took the leap of faith at the beginning, quit his job first. I had stayed in touch with him for quite some time, and eventually joined on as a founder. And the idea really was, we had all been traveling abroad, had seen, working late in the office, and had seen food delivery being very prominent. And he was based out of London, UK at the time. But nothing really existed in Canada at the time, and especially in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is sort of what we had only known for our lives. So we sort of said, hey, well, why not bring something that's very pronounced in the Londons, the New Yorks, the San Franciscos of the world, and let's bring it to Canada. And again, we were thinking small. We were thinking, let's bring it to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And that's really where, that idea sort of came from, was to bring something to Canada. And it's, even more pronounced, and it still hasn't changed much since had been building companies. And you still see some of the biggest brands on our phones that everyone loves, but they're all generally American, right? We think about Instagram, Netflix, Spotify, Uber. These are American brands who have built amazing companies. Everyone in Canada loves them, but they're not Canadian. And we started to realize that as we were building SkiptheDishes, was that, hey, we actually have a bigger purpose here. Rather than just bringing food delivery to Canadians, we're actually bringing technology to Canadians and innovation that's born in Canada, that's for Canadians. And we can actually build more of this tech ecosystem, sort of what you had alluded to at the beginning.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it reminds me, I got the opportunity to work with Morgan Stanley in California and Palo Alto and San Francisco, and it's like app central, right? Everything's there. Instacart, Uber. I mean, it's the ecosystem and the innovation is actually quite remarkable. So to start it up in Saskatoon, I mean, that's quite saying something. So just walk us through. So when did you start that company? And you sold it in 2016, but like how long was that success story kind of in play from when your business partner started it to when you got involved, and then when you guys exited it?
Yeah, I mean, so really the concepting, the initial prototyping was 2011. 2012 was when we first launched. And that's where we first launched Saskatoon. That was the first market. It's a good prototyping market. Second market, logically, is where can we drive to? Because we didn't have money. So Regina, Saskatchewan was the next market. And after that was Red Deer, Alberta. So you can sort of see the trend of like, how far can we drive? Because we can't afford flights at the time. And from there, end up scaling, bringing on our first institutional sort of venture dollar in 2015. At that point in time, brought another round of capital in 2016, and then ended up, selling the company at the end of 2016. But we actually stayed for a couple of years to continue running and building the brand up until 2019, essentially.
Oh, excellent. Fantastic. Yeah. So did the success of that for you and your partners, did it surprise you as to kind of how fast it grew?
To be honest, I mean, there's obviously the benefit of hindsight. But if I think about the forecast, because, that's what you're supposed to do when you build a business case, right?
Yeah.
Build a business case. We were submitting to banks to try to get loans, and our forecast, put us at, I'd say probably 100,000 customers was our market. Wasn't very big, maybe like $5 or $10 million of revenue, and that was over a 5-year period. We're like, hey, we're going to build a profitable business. We're going to use very little capital. We're going to, everything's going to work out really great, and we're going to build a $5 to $10 million business. When you think about what actually happened, and we were obviously very focused on that and really just trying to survive, because that's what you do in a startup world. You're literally pinching for pennies. You're staying at friends' houses, on their floors, whatever it took to survive. And you look back to where we ended up being, where SkiptheDishes, and Skip, today does north of, in terms of food delivery sales, north of $3 billion in sales a year. Has over 5 million customers, and we ended up, being in over 200 cities across the country, with about 65 or 8, maybe it's now 80,000 restaurants, locations across the country, and that's Canada only as well.
Wow.
So a lot of those pieces, had we anticipated, was that in my financial model? Absolutely not. People would have thought I was crazy, but the thing is, you start to realize that, hey, we can do these things, right? And I think that was the biggest unlock for us, after doing SkiptheDishes, was that if you do the right actions and you persevere and you bring on the right people, and you stay in the game long enough, then you can build something very, very meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, very well said. Good. Go ahead. I cut you off there. I didn't mean to.
No, and I think like the biggest piece was, for ourselves, obviously we grew something much larger than we had originally set out, but you start to reset the bar as you get bigger and bigger. And I think one thing that, as Canadians, we have generally lacked is that bigger thinking.
Yes.
Because we haven't been exposed to it, right? I can point to my experience in Saskatoon. Had never been exposed to a tech company. My friend's cousin was not Mark Zuckerberg, right? So you don't know what is in the art of possible. And I think when we were building Skip, and we employed over 3,000 people across the prairies, you start to show and prove that, hey, we can build companies that are competitive with the Ubers of the world, the DoorDashes, the companies that have billions of dollars of funding. We could do it too. And that's really the path and the avenue and the mindset that we have, still earlier on with Neo Financial as well.
Gotcha. Stay right with us. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Want to know how Canada's top entrepreneurs think about creating significant wealth? Join me, Thane Stenner, founder of Stenner Wealth Partners at CG Wealth Management and host of the Smart Wealth podcast. Download today at iHeartRadio or your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe now.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Andrew Chau. We're going to get right back into this interview. One of the things I found interesting, Andrew, in our prior discussions already is how, you're actually a pretty solid size employer, right? Employer, roughly 700 people working out of Calgary and Winnipeg today. But maybe tell us a little bit about the technology engineers, the technology specialists you've got. Because when you talked to me prior, I think that's a competitive edge for you in how you guys customize your own technology in building this new entity called Neo Financial since 2019. I mean, to get to 1 million, clients or customers already in 4 years is, in essence, I would call it kind of like an interactive online bank, you're
But
doing something right. So, I mean, but just maybe unpack the technology edge that you try to bring to this company.
Yeah, and I think it really starts with, what are our advantages as a company, and what are we good at? What are we not good at? And where do we think we can win? And with Neo Financial, we are essentially building a financial technology company that is helping bring more choice to Canadians. And set the context and set the stage. And for everyone that's listening, we've got 5 large banks that make up more than 90% market share in the country, which is really unheard of across the world.
Yep.
There's only really maybe 2 other examples of a dynamic like that, where it's such concentration. And because of that, Canadians have generally had the short end of the stick, right? Due to higher prices, not very competitive, just legacy experiences that don't necessarily look and feel like the experiences you'd expect from a bank. So what we really wanted to bring with Neo was really that next generation that was more modern, more seamless, and just made things a lot easier for our day-to-day lives. So we really focused on that everyday banking, everyday saving components, and layered on this loyalty component to it as well, with cashback networks and powering these retailers and their financial services programs. But in order to do all of those things and make it look and feel like an Airbnb experience or a Netflix experience, it starts with the scaffolding and the foundation of what we're building it on. So, a traditional path would be, hey, we'll go and procure traditional vendors. We'll use what the banks are using, and it will basically end up with exactly the same product suite as what the banks have. What we ended up doing was building all of that from scratch. So we built our own platforms, we built our own technology. We have a team of over 300 sort of R&D, product and engineering folks that are day in, day out building new technologies to make it easier and simpler for Canadians to manage their money. And you think about, in comparison or in contrast to what the big banks have, and I thought it was a myth, but in order to change specific lines of code in their systems, sometimes they have to bring people out of retirement to change that code, because it's still on a coding language called COBOL. I thought it was a myth, but it actually is true. So it's elements like that where, for us, it's really just rebuilding a lot of those components from scratch. And again, reimagining that experience for Canadians. And it really starts with that scaffolding to begin with. That is, much more secure, much more dynamic, much more flexible, and much easier to use as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you use the phraseology scaffolding. My brother-in-law runs a pretty substantial scaffolding business here on the West Coast as well, on the industrial side. So, and you're right. Basically, you're building the piping and then you're refining it, right? In essence, utilizing technology. So, how you're now roughly 4 years into Neo Financial's life, private company still. But maybe, I know Peter Thiel, related VC, pretty famous guy, obviously in the venture capital land. He's involved, or his VC's involved in your company. Maybe just take us through where you're trying to grow this to on the Canadian landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all begins with what we've built to date and what that looks like and how that feels. And in the last 3 years, we've essentially reached what I like to call bank parity. And bank parity is, we have the same products and the same offering that you get from an RBC or a TD. So if you think about bank accounts, GICs, high interest savings accounts, credit cards, the functionality of those cards, a small version of investments in terms of ETFs, as well as mortgages. So when we think about that broad suite, it took us 3 years to build that from scratch. So you can start to imagine, okay, what do the next 3 to 5 years look like for us? And for us, it's more, okay, how do we build on that? Again, that foundational piece in the scaffolding, and truly build something that is, even more competitive and more favorable to Canadians. And I'll use a couple examples again, more the core bones. We pay one of the highest interest rates when it comes to a high interest savings account in Canada. Today it's at roughly 4%. It's in comparison to something that's significantly lower at any one of the big banks. Our bank account is an everyday checking account, unlimited transactions, monthly fees, $0. In comparison, at a big bank, it's probably between $10 to $20, or you have to have at least $5,000 or $10,000 in an account in order to waive those fees, which not everyone has in Canada. So it's elements like that where we can start to chip away and build a much more meaningful business that's relevant to all Canadians from that standpoint. And when I think about those next 5 years, it really is about building out, again, more innovative features. How do we automate people's money so that you don't have to think about it? People hate doing their own budgeting. What if we can automate it for you? Especially with open banking coming out from the government, we can, through technology, simplify the way that you assign your your pay that comes through. How do we automatically budget that for you using machine learning or AI as well? So there's elements like that. Because we have the scaffolding and we own a lot of that technology, we can build these feature and functionality relatively quickly.
Interesting. So what's the big audacious plan? What's the goals of the company here, let's say over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, ultimately, there's the company goals of, hey, let's build a very meaningful business that can last 100 plus years. It's become more generational. We're not looking to have an overnight success. It is a long business that takes a long time to build, something that's durable. But ultimately, the reason why we're building Neo is to have an impact for Canadians, and whether that is helping them save money, helping them spend, helping them manage their money, helping reduce stress when it comes to money, because it's usually a huge piece to everyone's lives. Money is the fabric that touches everyone, and it's where we believe we can have the biggest impact is by helping people manage their money more effectively.
Interesting. So to drill down a little bit further on that question, you, I think, want to try to build, and really compete hard against the banks over time. And again, I think your team is kind of well on its way to kind of do that. What's been the number one entrepreneurial challenge that comes to mind? And you and I didn't pre-design these questions, so hope I'm not throwing you off too much. But basically, what have you seen as being your number one challenge as an entrepreneur to date that you're willing to share?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's always a ton of challenges. Otherwise, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And I think, for us, the biggest challenge, it always ebbs and flows, but I would say it always stems down to people and having the right people in the right roles, and convincing enough people who are a little bit crazy to take a leap of faith and believe in Neo. And that stems both from everyone on our team, whether you're in customer support to fraud to running marketing. Everyone at Neo has sort of taken that leap of faith because they believe in something that doesn't exist yet.
Interesting.
But the leap of faith is not only in Neo and the company, and not only the team around you, but also in themselves, that they can believe that they can actually build something of value, and want to work with others who also believe in that. So I think the hardest part about entrepreneurship is finding enough of those crazy people to join us in this mission.
So how do you do that, Andrew? Like, how do you, as the CEO,
Yeah.
help inspire that type of culture and attract the type of talent. Um, like maybe just take us through a month in the life of a neo financial culture building exercise. Like, how do you build the culture of an organization that's rapidly growing like that?
It all comes down to, the actions that we take as an organization versus, you know, preconceived activities of culture building, right? Um, for us, we've always been big believers that it has to happen naturally. And when I say naturally, it needs to,
Or organically.
organically in a way. But if I think about, a month in a life of a neo, someone who's at neo, there are a million things that can be priority, but for us, it's about versus prioritization of what's important and what's not. We have a ton of opportunities, more than we can handle today. So it is about that prioritization. And if I look at specific examples, one day we can be, working on rolling out and implementing an existing deal like Tim Hortons, right? We were one day we don't have Tim Hortons wasn't even on our radar. Another day, our one of my co-founders, brings it in and says, "Hey, we're now in the top 3, and now we got to win this." And then, 3 months later, we end up winning it. So then it's all hands on deck to roll this out in 6 months.
Wow.
Right, with a major multi-billion-dollar retailer, most iconic brand in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So our ability to pivot and iterate and move quickly is a huge part of our culture, but do it in a way that is not reckless, but with all of the safety and security components, because we are trusted by over 1 million Canadians to either manage their money, hold their money, keep it safe and secure. So those are all like that balancing act that we have, being in financial services and being in the space.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. So stay tuned.
Want to know how Canada's top entrepreneurs think about creating significant wealth? Join me, Thane Stenner, founder of Stenner Wealth Partners at CG Wealth Management and host of the Smart Wealth podcast. Download today at iHeartRadio or your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe now.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Andrew Chau. Let's get right back into the interview. So maybe compare and contrast the SkiptheDishes build out to the Neo Financial build out. Similarities, differences.
For sure. So I think from a similarity standpoint, at the end of the day, we're talking to consumers. We're talking to Canadians. The things that make people tick are consistent across whether it's food delivery or financial services or banking, right? People want convenience. Mm-hmm. People want things that are easy, that are seamless. People want things that save them money, right? Or save them time. Money or time is really the two main commodities that we have in our world. So that mindset has been really at the heart of building Neo, as well as building Skip, is, what's going to add value to consumers at the end of the day. We also, had merchants and retailers on both sides of our business as well. So with Skip, we work with restaurant owners, both big and small. And the same with Neo, where we work with over 14,000 businesses, helping power their loyalty programs. And help them bring more business into their doors through our cashback sort of rewards program that we have on top of our prepaid card and our credit cards as well. So that's where a lot of the similarities sort of come. I think from a build perspective, and from the differences perspective comes to the build side of things, right? Even though we weren't necessarily experts in food delivery at the time, we learned the industry. With banking, there's certain aspects where we could, build from a principal standpoint, which is more the experience side. But there's elements where, we actually need expertise, and we need that experience on how to manage risk and how to manage, different strategies as it relates to credit, issuing credit or issuing, fraud strategies. Um, that's where I'd say it's a bit different because we do need to leverage some industry experience. At the same time, whereas with SkiptheDishes, there was no industry experience to leverage. We were really, we were creating the industry essentially. Um, I think the other piece is, the speed at which we can move. I think we move as quickly as we can across both businesses, but with SkiptheDishes, you can call it an MVP, and if you're familiar, MVP, minimum viable product. You can launch that, and at a lower scale, you can sort of see if it works, right? With banking, there's not real, the MVP is a lot more robust because you're dealing with people's money.
Yep.
So you can't just, again, launch a product and hope that it works. It has to work.
Yes, very well said.
Yeah.
So as far as the number of customers you're hoping to grow Neo Financial to in Canada, care to share kind of what your 5-year bogey is?
Yeah, I mean, I'll maybe it's a little bit further out than 5 years, but there's 40 million Canadians in Canada, so I mean that's our target.
Yep.
Babies, retirees across the spectrum. That's the target, right? Like, there's no reason why we can't have everyone have Neo impact every single Canadian across the country in one form or fashion. People think in terms of market shares, in terms of percentage points here and there, but for us, it is really a long-term game, and it's a matter of, people say, well, why would anyone switch to Neo? Well, how do we solve for that? How are we going to add value? How do we be a part of that process?
And yeah, basically using technology to scale a business in a pretty exciting way. So another question for you, Andrew. What's one or two things that most people don't know about you?
One or two things that people don't know about me. I would have to say, outside of, my first, people think Skip was my first experience in entrepreneurship. Obviously, being in a restaurant, I was pretty much in that life. But in between that time period, when I was in, I think it was grade 7 or grade 8, I had started an online business, and I wish I knew a lot more about it at the time. But I used to run like a web hosting business that sold ad space, and I made some decent money, at least as a 12 or 13-year-old, and ended up I think folding it when I hit high school. But that's something that most people don't know about me, because it's not on my LinkedIn profile.
Exactly.
Probably not on there.
Good stuff. Well, it's good. So you've had this online wiring, right? It's based upon that story. It seems like that was in your DNA early.
I've spent a lot of time on the computer, for sure. As I was growing up, spent a lot of time just tinkering and figuring things out along the way. And I think that's, a big part of entrepreneurship, right? I didn't know food delivery space, but you learn it. And even with Neo Financial, there's elements where, obviously I've become, have deep domain knowledge in the space now, but there's elements where we're also, learning and figuring out how to build a better consumer experience. How do we make this easier? And a big part of it is just asking the question, why? Why are things done a certain way? And how do we do it differently, but still get to the same outcome? And that's really that thinking that, encourages that creativity and innovation across the team. And that's what we encourage our teams here at Neo to think about as well.
Interesting. So Peter Thiel, I'll just kind of circle back around to that and give him my time in the Bay Area. He's kind of a world famous venture capitalist and investor. Maybe just share with our audience that may not be as familiar with Peter Thiel as to kind of his prior companies that he's gotten involved with, and kind of why you think his VC group is involved with Neo Financial today.
Yeah. For those that are not familiar, Peter Thiel, he is one of the founders of PayPal. So obviously a very large financial technology company, one of the, you can call it the first, big ones in the internet era. And coming off of that, he was also one of the earliest, I think the first investor into Facebook as well. And obviously he's known for a lot of other technology investments across the board. Is sort of part of that PayPal mafia in terms of the founding, the original founders. And he created, alongside a few other partners, a fintech focused fund that invests in financial technology companies around the world. And with them, they've really focused on, or their thesis is that financial technology, these newer modern players, are going to disrupt and be ingrained into societies and into economies. And obviously it's one of the reasons why they invested in NEO in the first place.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So, a final question for you. As far as, where things are going for you at this point, and you're relatively young. I don't know if I'm supposed to ask you how old you are, but how old are you, Andrew?
How old am I? I'm 36.
36. Remarkable. I mean, what you and your business partners have done to date, and it's pretty exciting. But I think at the end of the day, is there anything else you'd like to help our listeners finish on here with this interview? Like, is there anything else you would like to share? Little wisdom tidbits about entrepreneurship.
Other than like shamelessly plugging NEO, and then everyone should try NEO at neofinancial.com. But we've got great products. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned is like, for anyone that's looking to jump in entrepreneurship, or think about doing something on their own, or creating a side business, the best time is now, right? And whether you need to jump in with both feet, dip your toes in, it's just more just getting in and learning, right? So the contrast to that is, you need to be, you need to know if you want to do it, and the best way to figure it out is by trying it and seeing if you actually want to do it. And it's not for everyone, right? There's folks, it's hard, it is difficult. There's tons of ups and downs, but the reason why I'm still doing it is because I love it. I love sort of building and figuring out solving problems along the way, and of course, that's really what drives me.
Well, it's very exciting, Andrew. Thank you for sharing the stories of your success to date, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to come. And I know you're super busy. But thank you for taking the time, and I think our listeners, via BNN Bloomberg platform, will be very intrigued with this interview. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and insights. And with that in mind, everybody, please tune in and look forward to just enjoying the feedback from this particular podcast. So thanks again, Andrew.
Right on. Thanks, Thane.
All right. That was a great interview with Andrew Chau. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I encourage you to download the iHeart Podcasts app and enjoy next month's session.
The comments and opinions expressed in this podcast are the results of work done by Stenner Wealth Partners. They may differ from the opinion of Canaccord Genuity Corp. and should not be considered as representative of Canaccord's beliefs, opinions, or recommendations. All views expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and do not constitute an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. The statements expressed herein are not intended to provide tax, legal, or financial advice, and under no circumstances should be construed as a solicitation to act as a securities broker or dealer in any jurisdiction. All views are intended for general circulation only and do not have any regard to the specific investment objectives, financial situation, or general needs of any particular person, organization, or institution. Canaccord is a member of the CIPF. The comments expressed in this podcast are the results of work done by Stenner Wealth Partners. They may differ from the opinion of Canaccord Genuity Corp. And should not be considered as representative of Canaccord's beliefs, opinions, or recommendations. All views expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and do not constitute an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. The statements expressed herein are not intended to provide tax, legal, or financial advice, and under no circumstances should be construed as a solicitation to act as a securities broker or dealer in any jurisdiction. All views are intended for general circulation only and do not have any regard to the specific investment objectives, financial situation, or general needs of any particular person, organization, or institution. Canaccord is a member of the CIPF.